It's Minner, staring into the back of a cement truck. I've been off this bike for a week. It has sucked. So I had to let it go for a week. Got in the car, stuck behind traffic, trolling around in the car like a big slob. And jumping back on this thing. It's a well, it's a different world. I haven't smiled so big in weeks. It's incredible. It's absolutely astounding how much fun this thing is. It was due for a 6,000 mile service, so I just changed the oil. And I knew it'd be a little late, and it's probably, how many miles does this thing have on it? A little bit over 7,000 miles, so no big deal. I got the rest of the service done just now, straight out of the dealer. And I'm going to talk, we're going to go a 6,000 mile review, or I guess 7,000 mile review at this point. And I'll talk about, you know, the details about service costs, etc. in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to enjoy this thing. I'm going to dig in, hit the corners, launch myself into space, drop out all the stress from a big week last week, and then we'll do the slow walk around and the 7,000 mile review. After being in a car for a week, this thing feels like an absolute missile. It feels ridiculous. Ass? God, if you're that impatient. God, look at the long black trench coat wearers. Where's the guns, guys? Where's the guns? Seriously, could you be any more white and concerning? Supposed to be about 17, 18 years old, maybe 20 at most, with long black leather coats, white with long hair. Someone's gonna shoot you, just preemptively. Why don't you just walk around in an ISIS uniform while you're at it? Idiots. A little wet. This guy's gonna be cold. There's an updated review after my first impressions. Like I said, I have about 7,200 miles on the bike right now. I just brought it to the dealer for the 6,000 mile service. I changed the oil at 6,000 miles. It's been rock solid, and overall, you know, the thrill is what I wanted, but also something that's I could use to commute on, because if you can't use it to commute, then to me, if you have one bike, it's not really worthwhile. If you can just use it on those special occasions, it's going to be versatile, and it is. So I'll start off with the appearance. How much do I like the appearance? How did that last over time? I like it as much as I did when I first saw it. It's hideously beautiful. You can see it has that awkward front end. It has the lopsided headlights. It's a little dirty right now, which is the way I like to keep it and the way she likes to be. It isn't cute. It isn't Italian, clearly, and it just looks like an angry machine, the way it should be. It's very purposeful. Has a very strong stance, very imposing. All those elements that I personally like, in terms of not being too cute, having a very mean look to it, not being overly colorful, and also having a very sort of strong, squat, aggressive, almost hunched appearance to it. So let's talk about the ergonomics of the bike. Now, one of the reasons why I bought this bike is because it is versatile. It is comfortable. It has a nice wide handlebars. You can sit in a semi-upright position. The arms are a little bit stretched forward. And in terms of the handlebars, they are pretty wide. My last bike, I actually got wider handlebars because I do have long arms and a little bit broad in the chest area, and it's just natural for me to have a bit of a wider grip. Also, like most people say, you know, going into corners with leverage, it also feels nice for me, at least. So I do like the bars themselves. The levers for ergonomics, the base levers were just fine. It was appearance, and I like some adjustability to levers as well. And between those two things, I upgraded those, but there's nothing wrong with the ergonomics of the regular levers. Knees, legs. I'm 6'2". I have pretty long legs. I have a 34-inch inseam. This bike does quite well in terms of accommodating the legs. You know, my knees, when I'm in any stance, really, they just sort of barely touch this rubberized cutout here. The knees do lift. Obviously, if you're in a corner, you know, the legs do fall into this groove here when you do lean, which is what the pads are for. It's something to grip onto when you're in that position. So that works out quite well. Going into the seat, a lot of people upgraded the seat or change it to, I know Sergeant seats are popular, seats that have a bit more of a cup here than this does. You can see it doesn't cup you a lot. The fabric is taut and stretched over here. There is some cup to it, and there's a bit of a backrest here to hold you on the way back. But I like the seat the way it is. I thought about changing it for those times when, you know, you're going really slow, but yeah, to be honest, I'm always moving at a decent clip, and I like to move around on the bike, and I like to have some adjustability while on the bike itself. I don't want something to cut me too much, because you want to move around on it. You want to hang a cheek off, you want to be sliding around. I also want fore and aft movement as well. If I'm riding more aggressively on a road like this with these sweeping corners and really tight corners, I'm definitely moved up a little bit in the seat. And you lean forward, you weight a little bit more over the front wheel, and having that smooth transition from the rear to the front of the seat is helpful in that situation. And when you're on more of an open road, you're looking to pass somebody or get on the gas a little bit, you also want to stretch out, you know, reduce your profile and better aerodynamics, and you go into that semi-tuck position. In that position, considering I'm long in the torso too, you know, knocking the butt back, you have some back support here, and you can kind of get lower on the tank. It's nice that you have that moon to slide back and forth. So, you know, the seat's pretty ideal for me. You know, my longest ride I go each way is probably a couple of 100 miles. You know, I do 400 miles in a day, not that uncommon. And my ass isn't uncomfortable, period. I mean, after a couple of hours, maybe a slight numbness. It really gets numb when I got my fiance in the back here, because I can't move around as much, and I'm trying, you know how it is. Everything's very sort of controlled, and there's not a lot of movement there, so the butt goes numb with someone on the back. But once again, that's not what this bike is for. Speaking of this, even though it looks stock, this is the comfort seat here. It's a little bit wider. If you put the stock seat over it, maybe there's an inch or so less of a flare in the sides here. Thickness might be slightly more, but by far the biggest difference is the width here on the seat. And it made a big difference for her. She went from one to the other in the same day, and she said it was remarkably more comfortable, mainly because, you know, the pelvis, the back of the base of the pelvis has these bones. It's the ischium, and they're these loops of bones really under the base of the butt area. And you know, if this edge is digging into those or they're hanging off of this, it can be very uncomfortable. And so these are just wide enough to sort of cover that bony area and give you some protection here so you don't go numb. That said, on like a 4-hour ride with her, she was uncomfortable. A couple-hour ride, it's just fine. Which, once again, with this bike, a couple-hour ride with someone in the back, I mean, really, you know, you should get a touring bike if you want a pillion for a longer period of time. This was expensive, ridiculously expensive. I think it was pushing $300, but to be honest, it was worth it because, you know, you want it comfortable, and you know, someone in the back shouldn't be tortured. And it's better to do that than to have to change to like an R1200, for example, which isn't exactly what I'd want at this point. But it certainly is more comfortable for a pillion. Regarding the height of the bike, I am on the tall side, so it's less of an issue for me than for someone who's a little bit shorter. I can say, you know, I've had people that are about 5'3", 5'4", sit on the bike, and they can tippy-toe it. So getting to the engine is just spectacular. It's incredibly strong, as you know. It has a lot of low-end torque. The mid-range is really powerful, and then it has the high-end scream as well. And it's not the double R scream, obviously. I haven't ridden the double R yet. I plan on it. But, you know, from what I understand, all the horsepower comes up in the last 1,000 to 2,000 RPMs in that bike. But this is, once again, everything is relative to what you've tried. But I'd be amazed to have anyone sit on this bike and not be absolutely floored by the amount of power on this thing. The negatives of the engine, there's always a balance between, you know, the high RPM horsepower and your low-end torque, and you know, the tuning of the engine and what the engine was designed for. So this bike, it was, you know, the engine was designed obviously at first for the double R, the last generation, and you know, had been tweaked and modified for more usable horsepower on the road and more power in the lower RPM range. Still, it's a high performance engine, and so when you start it up, it's pretty smooth. It does have a bit of a rough character to it, which I like. It's a little bit angry, and you know, there's not much vibration, but vibration is there. Not enough to me to really register. I drove a parallel twin before this, and that had much more vibration at idle, especially when you get in the higher RPMs. It get a little buzzy, and this is less so. But in the city, it's not meant to troll around in the city slowly. It can split. I ride around all the time with my girlfriend on a scooter, and it's easy. It's very easy, very manageable, very docile. The electronic throttle is it's very gradual, very progressive, and very controllable. So it's not something that's always lurching forward in traffic. It's very gentle, very light, and you know, in terms of the basic controls, it's pretty forgiving. However, if you're in the city most of the time, I'd say it's not a good bike. Obviously, it's not meant for that. You know, something with a smaller engine would be superior. I mean, a scooter is the most superior, in my opinion, in city traffic. It's the smallest, and you know, in terms of the fore-aft, and also the narrowest, and you know, outside of engine noise that they have a difficult time putting off of. You know, the smaller the better, and you know, small wheels, more maneuverability, better turning circle. That's all good for the city stuff. The turning circle on this, if you're the type of person that's making U-turns every second because you're lost all the time, yeah, it's an issue. But the turning radius isn't that great. But even on this road right here, I can turn around, you know, in this road without much of an issue. I don't have to make a 3-point turn to make a U-turn on any decent-sized road. You know, getting back to the positives of the engine, it's amazing. It can throw you off the bike. It'll pull a wheelie, and you know, first few gears very easily. You know, enough to scare the hell out of me a couple of times. The engine is most satisfying when it's accelerating hard, you know, or you're moving at a decent pace. You know, if you're going 40 to 100, that's when the bike comes alive, and that's where I think it was designed to shine. And so roads like this out here with these fast sweeping corners, you know, highways, it's great. You know, a lot of times in these highways out here in Southern California, the average speed, people are doing 80. And sometimes, as you know, on the bike, you get boxed in between cars. You start noticing people are switching lanes back and forth. You get a little uncomfortable because you're not sure people are paying attention to you, or really respecting your space. And sometimes you just want to get out of that. But you're doing 80 already. So your options are to try to go slower and get out to the right, which can be dangerous at times, or scoot out of there and blast off when you're already doing 80, 90 miles an hour. And this obviously has no problem. I mean, you go 80 to 120 in the snap of a finger. And you can put yourself in a place that makes you more comfortable. Or if you just want to put a smile on your face, you can also just dig into the throttle. Now, getting back to the highway speed and the ergonomics, I don't have a screen on this. I mean, like I said, I'm doing decent speeds on the highway. I'm not doing 140. I don't feel that naked bikes are really meant for that. If I bring it to the track, and I certainly will probably in the next few months, I'm still not going to put a screen on it. I mean, how much neck strain can you get? Yeah, if you're plowing on at higher speeds, the neck can be a little achy, but people might be more sensitive than others. I'm just not that sensitive to it. I can also say that compared to the last naked bike I rode, this little fender's got to be doing something. The airflow is much cleaner coming off this thing, and it's really not a big deal. Very rarely do I find myself bothered by the wind. It does happen at times, but usually it's crosswinds coming off the ocean, if I'm running parallel to the ocean, and that's not so much a windscreen, that's winds coming perpendicular. I can say at speed, the bike is incredibly stable, and it's also stable in the corners. It's just a very stable bike, and it's very comforting. When you are moving around at a decent speed, it's incredibly stable. While you're in the corner, the handling, it tips in really quickly, really well. It's not going to flick in like a bike that weighs 50 pounds less. It's not, a 600. But there's no issue in terms of its reflexes. Like I said, these roads around here, they're very tight, very narrow, and there's a lot of tight turns. And this handles it quite well. It's quite happy around here, and that moves us into the suspension. The suspension is stock. This is a standard suspension setup. It doesn't have the DDC. It doesn't have the extra ride modes Pro, I think they call it. It's just got rain and road modes on it, which is more than enough for me. If I really want to break it loose, you just shut them all off. I do at times wish there was an option between the road mode and shutting all the systems off. To give you some protection, probably like a dynamic pro mode. But that being said, you can really push this bike in road mode. And I don't know the suspension components, exactly who the manufacturer is, but it has required a lot of tweaking. When I first got the bike in the standard setup, everything was soft, and the front was a little soft. When I was hard braking, I did feel some compression. A little more movement than I wanted to feel, and I tightened that up in the front, and that's been no issue since. It's great, very stable, not rock solid. I don't feel like I'm going to lose an arm every time I hit a bump, so it's in the sweet spot. On the standard suspension, of course, you can see these forks there aren't gold, underlying the fact that it doesn't have the Ride Modes Pro and that it doesn't have the adjustable suspension in terms of just clicking to hard, soft, etc. But, the way I saw it is I'm going to find a mode that works on the road, and when I get to the track, a mode that works on the track. And if I need more adjustability, I'll do some quick suspension mods. I can have these revalved if I need to. And when it comes to the rear suspension, you can always put on a new shock and a new spring to fit my weight more accordingly. I'm about 200 pounds, so not the ideal weight, but I'm not way over limit. And once again, unless you're really pushing it, you're not going to, I don't think there's any need to upgrade the suspension. But the rear, I just added a little bit of preload onto. It's actually 2 rotations that I had the dealer do, by the way, because the tool they give you, even the dealer told me the tool they give you is inadequate to turn the preload setter. So they actually had to do it there, which is, I was embarrassed. Then I realized that they had to use a different tool as well to get this thing turned. So apparently it's something that you can expect. And if you want to play around with it a lot, you should probably get a third-party tool to change the preload on the back. But the bike is stiff. That's why I like it. You can change it to soft. I think it has a good amount of adjustability for street riding. If I hit a bump at high speed, I'm gonna feel it. You feel it in your spine. But what I really like about it is when you're going around these corners, and this is the fun I have. It feels very stable on a smoother road. It's not moving around on me. I know exactly what it's going to do. And when I go over, some undulations on the road at speed as well, there's not too much movement. There's not too much compression. I'm not guessing what the bike's going to be doing on me. So this is all rider preference, of course. I'm going to talk about this exhaust. This little baby here. The dreaded catalytic converter that's absolutely so hideous. Like I mentioned, first of all, when you're starting with the parents, it really doesn't bother me. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't for other people commenting on it, it never would have registered to me that it's ugly. And some people say, yeah, fine, maybe a little smoother transition down there would be better. But if you notice, if you look at the bike from this angle, which no one should be doing, by the way, it does stand out. But when you stand up like this, you can tell by the profile they made, probably because, to make it not scrape as well. When you look at it from this angle, it almost gives you the illusion that it's actually a smaller pipe here. And it's not until you actually get very low and look at it from the lateral aspect that you actually see the depth of that pipe. Which is one reason why I think it's a little, for me at least, a little ridiculous. The change is based upon appearance alone. If it was something cheaper, I probably would do it. I'm not saying I'll be unwilling to spend $1,000, $1,500 for something that was really necessary to make this bike give me a different experience. But to be honest, that has more power than I'm ever going to use in any situation. So it's not a power thing. A sound, I like the sound. I also live in a condominium complex, so I don't want to be too obnoxious. I ride this bike into my work, which is my job it's pretty conservative. Let's just put it that way. And coming in roaring any louder than this, I think would be an issue. So, the sound isn't something I'm big on. Of course, we all want a little more sound. It's just, we're prone to it. And I wouldn't be against it, but with my lifestyle, my surroundings, the sound is enough. So basically, power I don't need. Sound is not an issue for me. And the only thing left is really appearance. And the appearance doesn't really bother me very much at all. I do like the appearance of some of the aftermarket pipes. You have the option of the Austin Racing DCAT systems, which would be nice because I think you just cut the pipe here and you just fill it in on the way back. And it's cheaper than a whole system. You keep your headers. It seems like a good option for people that don't want to spend as much money, but once again, I'm just not sure it's worth it for me. The other option is just getting a slip-on exhaust as well on the back here, and that would be strictly for appearance. Some people say it sounds a little different. Whatever, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. It's not a big difference, but just for appearance alone, this is a little bright for my personal tastes. And however, I do like how the pipe is short. I like how it's low profile. I like how everything is low. Big pipes that come up under the seat or hang out up here, I feel like it's just not in line with performance. Why would you bring the center of gravity up? It would drive me crazy. But the pipe size and where it sits and the length is ideal for me. I don't like pipes that go beyond the rear axle. I think they're just sloppy and hideous, and that's obviously a very personal thing. I was thinking of just slapping on a slip-on, though. It'll likely happen at some point. So getting to the brakes, we had these Brembos front and rear, and they're incredible. People have complained about the brakes being grabby, a little too grabby at times. I haven't had that issue. I find that there have been a couple of times where I've come into corners too hot, and I had to slow down quick. And the race ABS, obviously with the pulling down on the front brake, activates the rear brake as well with it, and the ability to bring the bike down from speed incredibly quickly is beneficial in those situations. And so I like the fact that they have a lot of reserve potential that I don't normally need or use, but it's very comforting. In terms of day-to-day use, grabbiness doesn't bother me. I have a very gentle application. I generally use one finger. I drop two down, but I generally use the middle finger just to slightly grab this here, and it's a very gradual process. If you're used to grabbing a handful of brake on a prior bike and you jump on this, yeah, there's going to be an adaptation that's going to be necessary, but you'd ride it for half a day, and you really should adapt very quickly. Let's get into the electronics. Once again, my electronic package is limited compared to others, but the rain mode I use quite often. When it does rain, I'm in rain mode. It's universal. I use it. I haven't had any problems in terms of traction control, slippage. I do feel the traction control kicking in around corners here, and even in the rain when it's in rain mode, and it's gradual, and it seems to be very appropriate, and it's comforting to have. Once again, I addressed the fact that having one extra mode between road mode and shutting the ABS and the stability control off completely, having one mode in between that, I think would be ideal, and maybe something that I would look for in a future purchase. But the electronics have been very reliable. They have the gas range gauge on it, which is important to me. I know you can average your mileage, but keeping track of miles and it's just an extra thing I have to do on the bike. I'd rather look down on it and tell me what it's going to be. It's going to change based upon how aggressively you're riding. So it's nice to tell me, what the range is. It shows 155 miles. I think that's top, like max, that it'll show. I think I've gotten probably more than that. I haven't measured it against another system to validate it. But the range on this is very good. I'm pleased with it considering the level of performance that it offers. I get high 30s average on mileage, mid to high 30s. It obviously depends how you ride it. You can get mileage that's atrocious if you just hammer it around all day. Now onto the maintenance. I do the chain maintenance myself. I put these Light Tech chain tensioners on here because everyone has their thing. I'm a little anal about chain tightening, and I just like it spot on. This makes it so easy. You make the adjuster back here. You don't have to touch anything else. A couple of clicks one side, couple clicks the other, remeasure, you're done. Going to the service interval. So 600 miles, you're going to get the oil changed and bring it in for a service. 6,000 miles is the next one, and then every 6,000 miles thereafter. Not too bad. Obviously, the longer the service interval, the better, I think, for me. But I think the longer the service interval is just like oil change. I think people start getting concerned, and I think they should be. So I like to have the bike looked over every 6,000 miles anyway. All this stuff you could do yourself, especially if you can get a computer connection. You have to buy a device for that, but it's not worth it for me. Now, cost. After me taking care of the oil part of it, oil and filter part of it, I just got this out of the 6,000 mile service. Once again, it was at 7,200 miles. It cost me $200. So basically, for them to check the rest of the bike over, it took them approximately 2 hours and $100 an hour. Not too bad, but you can make a very good case for doing this yourself as well. Motor oil, I mentioned it recently. I did use the Rotella T6 from Shell on the first change. I did switch over to the Castrol Power RS 5W40 more recently. The shifting might be a little smoother on the Castrol. Other than that, I'm not noticing a big difference. I think people think they can feel things they can't on a regular basis. So that being said, I felt that the Castrol had a good, price. It's basically at a good price point. It was like $50 for 6 quarts of this stuff, which is very cheap for a full synthetic oil. The T6 is ridiculously cheap, and obviously you can put in AMS oil and other things that are more expensive, whatever makes you happy. So I think I did mention, I'm not sure if I mentioned reliability yet, but very briefly, I haven't had any issues. There's been no issues. Everything's been working. The engine works flawlessly, hasn't hiccuped, hasn't, stalled on me. The clutch hasn't misbehaved. There have been no electronic problems, no problem switching the couple of modes that I do have here. Every lever, every wire, everything is working beautifully. At least they tend to be a little over-engineered. Even their cars are the same way. So, you may have electronic stuff go once in a while, but the structure is extremely solid. And that's just my perspective, but no issues. I just ride it. I just get on it, I ride it. So onto the tires. These are the Pirelli Diablo Rosso Corsas, and these are the second set. But I'm guessing somewhere around 4,000 for me in the street riding in this area. And I think the more aggressively you ride it, you may only get 2,500 or 3,000 if you really pound them. That's pretty much it. Just I was going to say a brief review, but this seems like it's taken 6 hours, so I apologize if your head hurts after all this. But I'm very pleased, very happy. It's what I was looking for. It's extremely forgiving. It'll rip your neck off if you wanted to. It'll freak you out. It'll flatter you. And it's nice to look at least on my eyes. Any other questions, leave in the comments section if I missed anything pertinent. And otherwise, I'll see you guys later.